Aloha, you're listening to Chad Ford's NBA Big Board on the Locked On Podcast Network. My guest today is Rafael Barlowe of NBA Draft Junkies.com and host of Locked On the NBA Draft. We're talking top international prospects in the 2022 NBA Draft. Our episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com and tell them Locked On sent you. Rafael, let's go. All right, I'm Chad Ford. I'm with Rafael Barlowe of NBADraftJunkies.com, host of Locked On the NBA Draft as well. Rafael and I spent a lot of time together at the 2021 NBA Draft. It's time to talk some 2022 NBA Draft. What do you think, Rafael?
Yeah, man, I'm thinking, was that the last time we did a podcast when we were up till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, it seems, finishing out the...
We did some summer league grades as well.
That's right.
Afterwards, but yeah, everything's been really focused on the 2021 draft between us, and I think now with the college basketball season getting ready to start pretty soon, the international season has already begun. It's time to start talking some 2022 NBA draft, and I want to start right at the top because unlike the last couple of years, it seems like this one is wide open at the top. There's several top college freshmen that are going to be, considered. Chet Holmgren out of Gonzaga, Paolo Banchero, who's going to be playing for Duke this year, seemed to be, in a lot of people's minds, heavy favorites to be the number one pick in the draft. You've got Jaden Hardy, who's going to be playing in the G League this year, that might be the top guard prospect in the 2022 NBA draft. You have Jaylen Duran, who reclassified and is going to Memphis this year, who could potentially be a number one pick in the draft. And then there's Yannick Nzosa, right? Who's playing over in Spain right now, originally from the Congo, who probably has the most accomplished resume of anyone because he's already playing at a high level over in Spain and was doing so last year as a 17-year-old and actually even got minutes as a 16-year-old. And so it feels wide open to me. I've been talking to NBA scouts, GMs. They felt very uncomfortable right now ranking guys because last season, as far as scouting goes for them, was a tough season. And it was difficult to get their handle on, especially the high school players that are now college freshmen and just the sort of disrupted schedule that was there for them. So I'm really curious here, Rafael, as we look at the top of the draft. I know you're an international prospect guru, so you might be as familiar with Yannick as anybody right now. How does he stack up against some of these top American prospects that right now, I think in the public's minds are favorites, but I'm not really sure in the NBA scouts' minds that they are. Does Nzosa have a shot at being the number one pick in this year's draft, in your opinion?
Nah, I think I would lean towards Holmgren, but I think with Sosa, because he's only been playing for 5 years and there's still like a rawness to his game, and I think some are going to look at his upside and really consider him. But I think for him, it's interesting because he's going to be playing with Michael Eric, who I think Michael Eric could end up being the starter for his team. And I mean, diehard fans may know Michael Eric, but he's had a cup of tea in the NBA, played in the G League, has had a pretty good career overseas. And I asked Michael, because I happen to know him from my days with the Texas Legends, were they going to play a lot of minutes together? And he said he really didn't know. So I think that could be a factor in the sense because we know Chet is going to start. We know Banchero is going to start. And we know that they're going to be heavily featured. While I don't know if that's the case with Sosa. I mean, it's still early to determine that, but he doesn't have the clear path to getting 30 minutes per game.
Well, let's talk about his game for a minute. And then let's do a thought exercise as we take any of those other American players and take them over to Spain right now and ask the question, would they be getting any more minutes than Nzosa right now, given what we know about Spain. Let's start with his game. You've been able to break it down. You've got a video over at NBADraftJunkies.com that people can go over to and check out right now. What is it about his game that you like, and then what are you concerned about?
So I like the rawness of his game, and usually that's a red flag or concern. But it's weird because he has like this. I don't know. The best way to describe it is if there's a way that you can say someone is raw and polished at the same time, that is Sosa. I know it doesn't make a lot of sense. So on one hand, you can see that he's very raw in his game, but at the same time, you can see that he's a lot further advanced than you would expect someone who's only started playing for 5 years. He has good touch around the rim. I mean, I think early in his career, his defense is going to be what earns him minutes. But one of the things I like about him, and I just watched a game a few days ago, I don't think he had more than 6 points. But from the way he transitions from defense to offense is one of the best I've seen. I mean, with his speed, he can alter a shot at the rim and end up being the first man back down on offense. And I mean, I guess you can say it's part of his rawness. It looks like a coach told him, look, if you go out here, you block shots, and you run the floor as hard as you can earn minutes. And it seems like he has not forgot that because he literally sprints every possession down the floor. So I like the rawness and just how overall how he plays. I mean, he's playing hard, and I mean, it looks like he still doesn't know exactly what he's doing all the time. But what he does know how to do is block shots and run the floor hard, and then he does show some flashes of having a soft touch.
Yeah, I talked to one of his teammates last season who just was absolutely in love with him, in part for just exactly what you said. Just goes hard every minute, it plays with an energy and just sort of a passion for the game, work ethic off the charts. And defensively, he looks like he could be an all NBA defender someday in the NBA with this combination of length, size,
timing.
speed. Yeah, it's rare. This is a guy who maybe isn't the most explosive athlete that you could think of at that size, but is freakishly good as far as speed and sort of lateral quickness goes for a player his size. That seems to be really clear what he's going to be able to bring and why he was earning minutes even as a 16-year-old and as a 17-year-old in Spain. The offense seems to be the question mark about it's developing. He's starting to show a little bit of a face the basket game. Like you said, he's got a good touch around the rim. He certainly is an excellent finisher. He's great in transition, the way that he sprints the floor. What is it that you want to see him develop this year in his game to make him worthy of a number one pick in the draft?
Well, if he can, again, just be good at finishing pick and rolls. I noticed, when he finishes as the roll man, he has like this weird shot where sometimes like his arms are extended out, but it shows his touch. That's pretty unique. I don't know if he'll be able to show it this year, but let's say he does develop a face-up game and he's consistent. With his speed and his first step, I think he could be really dangerous as a guy that, if he's able to knock down face-up shots and can attack closeouts, and if he ever extends his range, I mean, I think that with his first step, and he could be like a pretty decent threat on attacking the rim off straight line drives.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that because he's, like you said, only been playing the game for 5 years, sometimes this is where we see major improvement in prospects as well from year to year, because they have more to their game. And based off of everything that I've heard people talking about him, his work ethic, his intelligence, his humility, his competitiveness, and his drive, there's a really good chance that we're going to be able to see that continued growth in his game right now. I think, as you pointed out, playing behind Michael Eric could end up hurting his minutes and opportunities there. But this is Europe, and you shouldn't read into that. And I don't think scouts are necessarily going to read into that the same thing that they would read into it if he was on Gonzaga right now, where we know he would start, or in Memphis, where we know he would start. right now, or Duke, where we know he would start and get big time minutes. And frankly, given what he's done in Spain, would be the most dominant or one of the most dominant college basketball players in the country next year if he was there. And so let's do a thought comparison for a minute. Let's say Chet Holmgren, who I think is a more skilled offensive player
Right.
Than Nzosa, also is an excellent rim protector, but doesn't quite have that same level of, maybe strength and speed that Nzosa does. Does he
I
get
think
the same
strength-wise
minutes?
they're about the same, and they can both
Kind of
probably do
wiry,
push-ups under a doorstep.
Do you think that Holmgren gets any more minutes in Europe than Nzosa does if he's over there?
The reason I'd say yes is simply because, based off the roster now, I think with Eric and Sosa, neither one of those guys really space the floor, and they need the ball in the same spots, which is not uncommon in Europe. In the NBA, you don't really see two guys that like the ball in the same spots anymore. You usually have one rim roller and a floor spacer. So I think because of his ability, or Holmgren's ability to shoot the ball, I think that he probably could get more minutes just from a fit perspective.
Chet is an interesting prospect because he looks like about as skinny as you possibly could be. It's almost, it's almost Poku-esque in sort of his body right now. But one of the most skilled 7-footers that I've seen come into the game for a while.
Yeah.
And though he's thin, he's kind of got, I don't know how to describe it. It's kind of like, Kevin Garnett was also really skinny as well and never really filled out that much his entire career, but he was wiry strong.
Yeah.
No one would ever sort of say with Kevin Garnett he was weak or was going to get pushed around. And there's some of that to Chet's game as well, right? That while he's thin, there's a certain wiry strength to the way and toughness to the way that he plays the game that shocks you when you just kind of come in and see him and his frame at first.
Yeah, I think the key word is toughness. Like, he plays, the word I like to use in my scouting reports is skinny tough. Like, he's not afraid to throw his skinny frame around or even initiate contact. And so he's not someone that you can say is soft. And I think sometimes that plays a role because he's aggressive. And so, yeah, he may not be the strongest guy, but sometimes mental toughness and mental strength can be as equally as good as natural strength.
So it sounds to me like you've got Holmgren right now ahead of Nzosa on your board, in part because he brings an offensive game, and certainly Holmgren's an excellent rim protector as well. What about Paolo Banchero, who is going to play at Duke next year? Now, here, from a physical standpoint, we've got a tremendous difference because Banchero looks like he has two tree trunks for legs.
Yeah.
He looks like he's a 28-year-old NBA veteran who's been on a weight regimen for a really long time. He's not an explosive athlete, but a very, very skilled big man that can do just about anything on the floor right now. How do you see him projecting to the NBA?
Very interesting because he's definitely skilled. I like him as a passer. I think that's what kind of stood out to me the most is his ability to just kind of be a hub as a passer. The lack of athleticism stood out to me, though. He's not an explosive athlete by any means. There were times where I thought like he tried to attack off the bounce and he didn't have the speed to necessarily blow by the guy, but he didn't have that pop to finish at the rim. And it led to him picking up his dribble a lot. And he was able to make passes or, on the AAU, on the high school level, if that did happen to him, he was still strong enough to bully his way through. So I'm curious to see how he plays against guys that are stronger. He's still going to be one of the strongest guys and most physical specimens in college basketball. But I think it's going to be a difference in, just as far as overall strength. And he may not be able to bully guys as much. But it's weird to me because I can't think of a time, and I could be wrong here, where we had a guy that was projecting as the number one pick, but the main knock on him was he did not have close to ideal athleticism.
Yeah, I mean, the last guy that we could probably talk about there was Luka Doncic, as a guy who was touted as a potential number one pick in the draft. That teams had, concerns about, his athleticism, how it especially would translate on the defensive end. They're different players; they play different positions, on the floor for teams. But he's sort of the last guy, and in Luka's case, it sort of worked out fine.
Yeah.
It worked out that his lack of athleticism wasn't going to be a major issue in the NBA. But they do play different positions. And I have had multiple scouts worry too that just given his frame and his body at his age, he might continue to get heavier.
Yeah.
That as those legs and get thicker, it impairs that lateral quickness and what have you. And that this may be a case sort of like Jahlil Okafor, where you have a really, really skilled player that just isn't going to have the pop or athleticism to be able to thrive in the modern NBA. And again, they're different players, but it is something that I think teams are watching carefully, because at high school you can dominate based off of that physicality, and even in college to a certain extent. Stanley Johnson sort of comes to mind as well as
Shabazz
someone who could
Muhammad.
who could just dominate based off of the fact that they're physically stronger and more mature than other players. Now, I think the one thing that Banchero has going for him is he's quite skilled.
Yeah.
And like, as you said, an excellent passer, seems to have an excellent feel for the game. And that may allow him to compensate. Look, we had an MVP in the NBA this year that not only lacks elite athleticism, doesn't even really come close to even regular NBA athleticism, and was still the MVP of the league. So it's possible to get it done, but it's certainly a potential knock against him. What about Jaylen Duran? I mean, this is also strange, right, Rafael? Because we're talking about a league that's wing obsessed and combo guard obsessed, and the top three guys, I think that, or the top four guys that everybody's sort of talking about in this draft, are all bigs right now. Jaylen Duran reclassifies this year, going to Memphis. What do you see in his game, and how does he stack up against those other bigs?
Well, similar to Banchero, maybe not as skilled, but dominated high school and AAU just off of pure strength and size. I mean, how you describe Banchero, I can even make a case and say that Duren is even bigger and stronger. I mean, he looks like he's really been playing 10 years with the NBA strength and conditioning program. And it's crazy that this is just natural strength. I don't think he's as skilled as the guys mentioned before. I mean, he's shown some flashes, but I think he's going to be an effective player just off of his energy, his size, and his athleticism. It's weird because, like you said, I mean, there were rumors that the big man was dead. They were extinct, and now we're looking at a draft where we could see 4 of the top 5 players, where their best position could be at the 5 spot. But I think he's the least skilled of them all. And so I wonder, what skill set does he bring to the table? And then the area that concerned me the most is, I have it in my notes here. And I mean, it's probably, his team won, but he only shot 33% on post-ups in the EYBL. Not saying that he's going to get post-ups in the NBA, but you figure with his size and his strength and his 7'5" wingspan, he should at least be able to at least dominate on post touches against his age group. And that's something that I didn't really see.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's absolutely a knock on one end, but then on the other end, realistically in the NBA, is he ever really going to get these sort of touches anyway? And so maybe, maybe this is an example of, maybe it's good that he's learning, how to score in other ways and face the basket. Athletically, he does seem to be ahead of Banchero as far as that's going to be where he's going to hang his hat, is that he's a more fluid athlete than Banchero is, more explosive athlete than Banchero.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that he's going to be able to impact games without really getting touches. I mean, just when I watched his summer film, a lot of times it was just somebody would shoot, he's carving out space, getting offensive rebounds, activity and energy. But I wonder, even though the size is a little different, I wonder if he ends up in the same predicament as Isaiah Stewart from 2 years ago. 2 years ago, Isaiah Stewart was considered a top 10 pick, dominated off of just pure energy and strength. And then for whatever reasons, he didn't have the great season at Washington. It seemed like he fell on a lot of draft boards, but then ended up being selected higher than most people thought. And he had a pretty good rookie year. So I wonder, is there going to be some similarities there?
The other interesting thing about Duren is that he's a year younger than these other guys. He should be actually playing as a high school senior this year, which will even be crazier when you see him and see his body and everything else, like what he would be doing to the high school competition, the next level. I think it's a good move. Let's talk about Jaden Hardy for a minute. Hardy is a guy who, out of the G League, is someone who I think is going to be the player that is most likely going to be as a guard considered as one of the top picks in the draft. And so it seems like Hardy is the guy when we're talking about a guy that's playing a more traditional position that NBA teams are hungry for right now as a combo guard in the G League. He's going to have to fill big shoes from Jalen Green's shoes there at the G League Ignite team this year. What do you think about Jaden Hardy and his chances of going number one?
It's interesting. You're the first person that I've seen that really has mentioned him as a possible number one pick. I've mostly seen, the guys that we mentioned ahead. He has an outside chance. The G League is going to be a good test for him. He's someone that the same concerns I had about Jalen Green, I have about him, except, Jalen Green, we knew that he was, an elite athlete. But the concerns I had about Jalen Green coming into last season was, how does he play with others? Because I know on Team USA, the under-19 team a couple years ago, he came off the bench, but he was playing behind Kay Cunningham and Tyrese Halliburton. But going to those games, I thought that he played best in the second unit where everything revolved around him. So my concern was when he goes to the G League, as far as like his decision-making, his passing, yada, 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 which he ended up having a good year. So those are somewhat of my concerns with Hardy. He is, you can even make a case and say he's more of a gunner than Jalen Green. His shot selection is very similar to Cam Thomas, in my opinion. A lot of deep, long-range threes. And so I had mentioned on one of my podcasts is it because of his ability that they think that he can play the point? Is that why he's such a higher regarded prospect than Cam Thomas was at the same stage? Because to me, they're similar. I don't even think the size difference is that much.
Yeah, I would say the one thing, if I were to take something in Hardy's favor, that at least from my scouting of him and talking to scouts, is that they think there's more potential for him to transition into a guard that can play both the point and the two than there certainly was with Jalen Green, where I think at this point we just sort of know what he is and that's what he's going to be. That Hardy has that potential to be a primary ball handler at the next level, and that he doesn't have the pop that Jalen Green has. He's not going to jump out of the gym the same way. He's not a bad athlete, but he's just not that elite athlete that Jalen Green was. But if he can hone that skill, and I think that's going to be what scouts are going to be looking at the G League next year, where he can play some as the primary ball handler on a team and be a better distributor and not just a pure scorer. That's his path, in my opinion, to making the argument that he could be the number one pick. And look, frankly, just based off of where the scouting is right now, he probably shouldn't necessarily be in the mix with some of those guys. But again, you're looking at the teams that are in the draft right now that are going to be in the lottery, and how many of these guys are going to be wanting to select a 5 or a 4 at the next level. And just for a lot of these teams as well, they just feel like that position, you go get a free agent at that position, or you draft lower in the draft for that position just because of the value at the next level. So it's going to be a really interesting test of that theory next year. We probably should say one last thing before we go to break, which is that none of these guys are the best young player in the world right now. As much as we're talking about all of these guys right now, I think that you and I both would say that someone who is not going to be eligible for the 2022 NBA draft because of their birthday, that they won't turn, unfortunately, 19 years old by the end of the 2022 year, should be and would be the number one pick in the draft this year if they were eligible for the draft. Is that right, Rafael?
Oh yeah, talking about Victor Wembanyama.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and you've done a recent video on him as well.
Yeah.
He'd be number one, right? Just hands down number one pick in this draft.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't wait to see him and Chet match up. And even though Team USA won, it was because of Wembanyama got in some foul trouble. I thought he outplayed Chet. Chet ended up winning MVP and had a great tournament, but Wembanyama's just on a different level. I mean, they're both like super, super skinny. They're both skilled. I think Chet is a better shooter, which he shot a lot better. But Wembanyama's just on a different level defensively. And Chet is a very, very good defender. But Wembanyama, just his ability to switch out on guards and block shots from behind. And I mean, he just had a tremendous impact. And yeah, man, unfortunately, he's too young. So some could say that Amani Bates could also be in that same discussion as someone that could be in the mention for a number one pick in this draft if he were eligible, which he's not because of the same thing, because of his age. But yeah, I mean, Wembanyama, I think, is the best international prospect since Luka. And I've even heard some people say they think he's the best NBA prospect since Anthony Davis. And I mean, it's a lot to live up to. I'll be following him in France and see how he does in the EuroLeague, because he may even be skinnier than Chet Holmgren. He's really, really skinny. And I mean, the EuroLeague is definitely a more physical league than I mean, you can say it's more physical than the NBA. So I'm really going to be following his development this season.
I'm excited about him as well. He's a unicorn of a player, and just given his size, his incredible length, and the skill set, that I think what gets NBA scouts excited is the defense is obvious and what he could become, right? Like a perennial defensive player of the year type candidate. But there's also enough there offensively to intrigue you that he could be an incredibly well-rounded player and have a Giannis-like impact at the next level, just in being, they call him the Greek freak, just another freaky player that really, really there isn't really another player that you can really point to and say he's like this guy at the next level. So he can kind of redefine the position in a certain way. Well, look, let's talk quickly about our sponsors, one of which is Directv Stream. Does this sound familiar? You've got one device that lets you catch the game live, another that lets you stream your favorite shows. You're watching sports highlights on your phone, and you've got your neighbor's best friend log in for the good stuff. Well, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all the entertainment you love without the hassle, and a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called Directv Stream. It brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, so you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes, no need to buy another device ever again. And the best part, there's no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with Directv Stream. You can learn more at directv.com. That's directv.com. Comparable device required. Content varies by package. And of course, Rafael, it wouldn't be an NBA Big Board podcast if we didn't talk about Built Bar. Built Bar has so many delicious flavors. There's something for everyone. When you talk to Built Bar fan, like Rafael and I are, we definitely are passionate about our faves. I'm always the big coconut guy. That's my favorite. I remember it was birthday cake was yours for a while right now. Birthday cake isn't offered, so I'm going to give you an option here. You've got coconut, cherry barcia, raspberry mint brownie, double chocolate, salted caramel, strawberry orange cookies and creams, German chocolate. What's your favorite, Rafael?
Right now, I've been eating a lot of the salted caramel.
Salted
That's what I've
caramel,
been. Yeah, I
awesome.
still have some left from the live draft show. I'm down to probably like my last 5, but that's what I've been eating.
Guy took some boxes home with him. They're really awesome. And here's the thing: not only do they taste great, they taste like a candy bar. They're chewy, they're moist, they're delicious, but they're also healthy. Most flavors have 17 to 18 grams of protein, calories ranging from 130 to 180 calories, only 4 to 5 grams of sugar, only 4 to 5 grams of net carbs. Order today and get your grasshopper cookie or raspberry, whatever you like. Built Bar is also the official protein bar of the U.S. track and field team. It's cool. Go to BuiltBar.com and use promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your first order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com. All right, I'm back with Rafael Barlowe. NBADraftJunkies.com is where you can go to see all of his video scouting reports. He's also host of Locked On NBA Draft. I'm Chad Ford. You can find my stuff over at NBABigBoard.com, where I just did an article on the top 7 international prospects in the 2022 NBA draft. Lots of NBA stuff over there as well, including thinking about which teams are most likely to land the number 1 pick in the 2022. Will it be Orlando? Will it be the Oklahoma City Thunder, Detroit Pistons, Cleveland Cavaliers? You can go over there and check out the odds for each of those teams of landing the number 1 pick. I want to get back and now talk about 2 other interesting international candidates, Rafael, both of whom are going to be playing in the United States this year. Dyson Daniels, who might be arguably Australia's best international candidate right now, deciding not to do the Josh Giddey thing or not to do what a number of other American and international prospects do and play over in the NBL in Australia, but instead come over to the G League Ignite team this year. What do you think about Dyson Daniels, and where do you think he ultimately lands when we get to the NBA draft later this year?
That's a good question as far as where I think he lands, because I have some concerns. I see that. I mean, he has good size and strength and passing instincts. I mean, he fills up the stat sheet, and I mean, he's real unselfish. He's definitely someone whose game fits the modern NBA, but I'm still trying to decide, like, what is the skill set that he hangs his hat on. Like, we've seen quite a few guys that were versatile, that did a little bit of everything, but they struggled finding like this exact skill set. And then he's another guy that I felt like did not have like ideal athleticism. Like, I didn't see like really good like vertical pop. I think he's an inconsistent shooter at this stage in his career. And even like little things, like I didn't see him get to the free throw line a lot at the under 18s. Again, I like his size. I think maybe he could have a role as like a 3-and-D secondary ball handler. But I'm still looking for the one skill set outside of being versatile, which, I mean, you can say that's a skill set, but the one skill set that he could hang his hat on that will make everything else kind of stand out.
Yeah, it's interesting. He played for Team Australia in under-19 World Cups this year, averaging 14 points a game, 5 rebounds a game, 4 assists a game, 2 steals a game. You can see that all-around game that Rafael's talking about there. Probably had his best game, actually, against Team USA, where he had 18 points, 6 assists, grabbed 4 steals in that game, but just shot 1 for 6 from 3. And I think this is interesting because on one hand, as you point out, he fits this prototypical versatile wing that can pass the basketball, can defend multiple positions. Right? There's the defensive edge to his game there. It's tough to call him a 3-and-D guy yet when his 3-point shot isn't there yet. So there's more D than 3 right now to his game. And he can be a bit turnover prone as well. But to me, he's an interesting prospect that, again, in a wing obsessed league, right now, there's some other wings that are certainly I think are going to go off the board before him. But he's also playing in this G League environment now, where if he thrives in that environment, that's going to be a big leg up for him. And just looking at the young players on this G League roster, G League Ignite roster this year, he's probably, you can make the argument maybe it's Michael Foster, but either him or Michael Foster are probably the second best young player on this roster. So they're going to get significant minutes and a significant chance to shine there.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how he plays because I said like maybe 3 and D, and of course, like you said, the three isn't there, but is he good enough to be like a primary ball handler for a team right now? So that's why I'm curious to see his role. Um, Daishen Nix is someone who was a big guard that played in the G League last year, and it really didn't help his stock. I mean, you can make a case and say he would have been in a much better situation if he had went to UCLA. And I think Daniels may, just based off of what my opinion is right now, I think that he probably would have. I think his game is more so suited for like college basketball in a sense, and maybe even over there. But I think going to the G League is a big gamble and a big jump that could actually hurt his draft stock.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you could also make the argument he should have just stayed in Australia in a league that already is getting a ton of scouting right now, but he's not going to play with this same level of NBA athletes that's over there, which maybe helps him show a little bit. Ousmane Dieng goes the opposite direction. He leaves France and goes over to the New Zealand Breakers. Isn't actually going to be playing in that Australian league right now. This is a guy that scouts are very, very intrigued with on his upside. Again, a 6'9" athletic wing who can play multiple positions, sometimes gets compared to even like a young Paul George. But the concern over there is that he may have stepped up too high into the level of competition, given his size, his strength right now. And, the question for him is he going to get a featured role right now for the New Zealand Breakers, especially when you look at this team right now and look at who's probably going to be handling the ball for this team. Is he going to be a guy, especially when you think about, okay, Peyton Siva's on this team, is going to be, ball handler Hugo Besson, who we'll talk about in a little bit, is going to be on this team as well. Because he seems to me, when I'm watching him play, that his primary value is when the ball's in his hands and he's creating from the wing. That seems to be when he's the most intriguing prospect to me, and I'm just not sure he's going to be able to get that done for the Breakers this year.
Yeah, I mean, I really think it could be RJ Hampton all over again. RJ was on the same team, New Zealand, and they had a couple guys that had good careers. I think Sek Henry from Nebraska was on that team, and they had another ball handler. So RJ, I mean, as a guard, who his biggest, I guess his biggest area for improvement was his shooting. Had to play a lot of off the ball, and RJ really only had opportunities to showcase his skill set in transition. Very rarely was he able to play in pick and rolls, and it affected his draft stock tremendously, to the point where I even had his dad on my podcast, and his dad was saying up until he got selected on draft night, he felt like, man, we really made the wrong decision. And so with Dieng, I think it could be a very similar situation because, like you said, he's best with the ball in his hands. He's not a guy that is a great catch and shoot outside shooter right now. And like you said, his most intrigue is, with his size and ball handling and creativity. That's what people are going to want to see. And I mean, he has a teammate that's just a fellow Frenchman who we mentioned, Besson, who's going to have the ball in his hands a lot. And I expect that he's going to have the better numbers. I think he's going to look better in that situation than Dieng. And so, I mean, Dieng is someone that I think could be projected top 10 right now, and I could easily see him sliding simply because of lack of opportunities to showcase his full skill set.
Yeah, it's an interesting decision, to leave Europe, come over there, do this. And like you said, whether he gets the opportunity to shine in the way that he needs to shine is a question mark. But he's incredibly skilled. He's a really, really intriguing prospect to watch. He's also 6'9", 185 pounds. So yet another player that just his body is also really underdeveloped right now. And that can also be a challenge in a pretty physical Australian league as well. Let's talk about another guy from the Dominican Republic, played at Gran Canaria in Spain on their B team. A lot of teams really liked him, looked really good at Basketball Without Borders, is going to be the first test case for the new Overtime Elite League right now. Gene Montero, one of the more intriguing scoring guards in this draft because he really knows how to score the basketball. Maybe stuck a little bit between the 1 and the 2. Very tough defender right now, but a fun player to watch, if nothing else. Like he can be an absolutely electric player to watch with the ball in his hands. What do you think about Montero and his NBA draft stock?
I love his game. My first time seeing him was at Basketball Without Borders in Chicago. So that was 2020. And I thought he was the best player at that camp. He didn't win MVP. I think Ariel Hookporty won MVP. But this was a camp where Josh Giddey was at the camp. Wuhan Bagarin, who was drafted by Boston, was also at this camp. There's someone else that was at this camp that slips my mind. But I thought he was the best player, the most impressive. And, of course, sometimes those camps are more suited for guards to shine and look good. But, he doesn't pass the eye test. And, you could imagine how he looked almost 2 years ago. He was a skinny guard, but just very creative with the ball in his hands, finds ways to put the ball in the basket, has great pace. He's one of my favorite prospects to watch. And I'm really going to be looking forward to seeing him because, I think everybody is intrigued by this overtime elite and just trying to – I don't think, at least – speaking for myself, but I don't think a lot of people fully understand like who they're going to be playing and what's the whole structure. And so, but yeah, for him being the face, and I'm just looking forward to seeing what he does. It could be a situation where I wouldn't be surprised if he puts up like ridiculous 25 points per game numbers in this setting because that's what his game is suited for. And I feel like this league is going to have more of an entertainment value to it than development, maybe a little bit of both. But I think in order for them to continue to want to steal prospects from college and Australia and the G League, they're going to have to do something a little bit different. So I think this league is going to be really fast-paced and entertaining, and I could see him putting up ridiculous numbers there.
I could as well. And I think the hardest thing right now is to be able to gauge what's going on with the overtime elite. Like in the G League, I think there was some trepidation from scouts in the beginning, but they knew the sort of level of competition. They knew what the G League was. You knew most of those players were former college stars, guys that maybe have gotten some run in the NBA, second round picks that are getting some time down there. And so you kind of understood the level of competition. With the overtime elite, it's just a blank slate right now. They do have some real talent coming in, though most of that talent is more projected towards the 2023 NBA draft than it is towards the 2022 NBA draft right now. I do think for Montero, it's probably smart in that he's going to be the guy. He's going to be the face of that league probably this year. He's going to put up video game type numbers. How scouts decide what that means is going to be a question, I think, for him. But I don't think there's any question in my mind that if he was in college basketball right now, he still could be one of the most dynamic scorers in college basketball next year if he was coming in as a freshman right now. And I think the key thing for him, two things. One, he's more of a two guard than a one right now, but he's only 6'2", 180. It's going to help his stock a lot if he can project at least as a combo guard at the next level. So can he show the ability to get other people involved? And then he needs to hit the deep ball with more consistency. Shot about 30% from three last season in Spain. Needs to up that number considerably if he's going to crack the lottery. But certainly one of the more intriguing players to watch. And again, a guy that, like Cam Thomas can just really, put the ball in the basket, just has a knack for doing it. Rafael, when we get back, we'll talk about some of the other top international prospects, guys that could be first rounders in this year's draft. But before we do so, I want to talk again about our sponsor, Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com. At home and in your pocket. Save time and money while using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership? Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. They have everything you could need: brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck, right? Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box, so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. RockAuto.com. All right, I'm back with Rafael Barlowe. He is the host of NBA Locked On Draft, Locked On the NBA Draft, and the Locked On Podcast Network. Also, NBA Draft Junkies.com, where you can see all the cool videos that he's making right now. Already got started with a number of these international prospects right now. And so as we're talking about some of these names right now, like Nzosa, the Dieng, and you want to go see their game, head over to NBA Draft Junkies or go check their YouTube channel out. And you can already see Rafael's breakdown of some of those players right now. And I'm going to give another name right now that you just recently broke down, who is interesting to me in one of the more polarizing prospects for the international prospects right now. So I think some of the guys that we've talked about, Dieng, Gene Montero, certainly Nzosa, pretty unanimous that these guys are, potential lottery picks. In Nzosa's case, potential top 5 pick. Nikola Jovic.
Not to be confused with Jokic.
Not to be confused with Jokic. And if you see the two of them, you won't confuse them. They definitely look like different players, but their names are just literally one letter off. From Serbia right now, had some NBA scouts project him as a top 10 pick, others late first round. Right now, was the third leading scorer for FIBA under 19 tournaments this year. 19 points a game, 8 rebounds a game, couple assists a game, couple of blocks a game, shot 36% from 3. Had good numbers for Mega Basket last year as a 17-year-old, though he didn't necessarily shoot the ball well. This is a very skilled, another potential like playmaker for type player at the next level. But scouts seem to be really split on what his NBA prospects are. You just did a video over at NBADraftJunkies.com on him right now that you can go check out. What did you think about his NBA prospects as a player?
He does a little bit of everything. What position? I mean, I guess you can say he's a 4, playmaking 4. It's tough. Like, I could see how scouts can be divided, because on one hand, I can see how you can say, all right, this guy put up the numbers, he filled up the stat sheet, he's tough, he can post up smaller players, he can make plays out of, from the elbows, he can pass, he rebounds. And then, there's the whole athleticism thing. I think he's not a bad athlete, but he's one of these guys where he looks athletic if he has a runway. It's like, he's not a guy that's going to have like the quick twitch, explosive vertical pop. But then the part that I thought was really interesting about his game is, and you usually don't see this with a lot of international prospects because they play such a team-centric game. He does have a lot of isolation one-on-one to his game. And it looks like, and I had mentioned this in the video that I did, that he watches Jason Tatum film. Like, it seemed like if he had a smaller man on him, he got the ball at the, in the short corners or the elbow, and he just said, forget the offense, I'm going to isolate, I'm going to go one-on-one, and a lot of tough contested fadeaways and, times where the ball didn't move, which I'm not used to seeing that from a lot of European prospects. And so on one hand, you can say like, he does have the skill set to play this well-rounded team game, but also he does have the mentality of being a scorer and wanting to take over games. So I like that a lot. But as far as like his shooting consistency, I think if he were a better shooter, then I think it wouldn't be. I don't think scouts would be as divisive on him. He's more so of a shot maker than shooter, and so I think that could be the reason why there's such a big divide on this game.
I think the shot is definitely one thing. I'm not sure that they know yet that it's broken, but he's not an elite shooter coming into this. And defensive effort seems to be another thing that scouts get a little bit more frustrated with him about. And maybe some of that's just attributed to that lack of like explosive athleticism, what have you. He certainly is tough. Interesting to me because given the team that he's on and given what he did last year as a 17-year-old, 17 points a game, 8 rebounds a game, 3 assists a game, a block a game, as a 17-year-old, I think scouts are expecting a big year this year for him. Is he going to get some of the, Şengün shine at the end, where people were debating Şengün's not an NBA athlete. I'm not really, was shooting 13% from three at the time, but yet was putting up huge numbers in Turkey, ends up winning the MVP of that league that year. Could Jovic do something like that and then really raise the debate because the analytics folks start getting into the mix as well and saying, look at his age and the way he fills up a stat sheet right now, you can't ignore it. I think that's going to be the interesting question for him.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the biggest difference is I think the Turkish league is a lot stronger than the Adriatic league.
Right.
So that could be the big difference if the numbers are similar. And also, last year he shared, if I'm not mistaken, he shared responsibilities with, the name slips my mind right now, a kid from Gonzaga. I think the Sixers drafted him. I think he's playing for Efes this year. What's the big name? The Serbian from Gonzaga that left.
And he was in the draft, and I'm spacing it as well. It's all right.
Yeah. So they shared the responsibilities, and he still put up pretty big numbers. So he could definitely see a huge jump in his numbers. Like I would not be surprised if the numbers jumped to about 22, 23, 9, and 4. So that's a good point that I never thought of. But I think it's still all going to depend on how well he shoots the ball.
Yeah, he's going to put some pressure for sure on teams. And I think you're right. The jump shot may end up being the swing skill and it could be a pretty big swing between a guy that gets, starts to get mentions in the top 10 or a guy that, we're talking about in the 20s instead. Let's talk about a guy who had some first round buzz last year, apparently not enough. He ends up pulling out of the draft. Roko Prkacin, who played for Sabona last year, he's back. He was one of the youngest players in the draft last year, was barely going to be 19 years old at the start of the draft, still would be one of the youngest players in this year's draft. His projected age is 19.6 on draft night, which makes him younger than Chet Holmgren, younger than Paolo Banchero, younger than Jaden Hardy, for example. So he's still a young prospect, had a pretty good season for Sabona last year. What do you expect for him this season as an NBA prospect?
Yeah, I think he'll make the jump. I'm surprised that he decided to come back. I thought he definitely could have been selected in the late first round. You figure teams like the Thunder and the Rockets, you figure like one of those teams may have taken a shot on him because, they're in position with all their draft picks to gamble on young talent. But yeah, I think he can make a jump this year. Another one of these super skilled European fours, just does a little bit of everything. Similar to Jovic, I think the shooting is going to be determine his draft stock. I think he's a decent shooter, but if he can become a more consistent shooter, and I think the difference between him and Jovic is I think Jovic's numbers, his shooting numbers, aren't that great from three because of shot selection. He does take a lot of tough shots. While, when I watched Rocco's film last year, it seemed like early in the season, teams were just leaving him wide open at the top of the key. He had a little bit of success knocking down jumpers, but if he can become a more consistent shooter from three, then I think it's really going to help his draft stock.
If you're hearing those roosters in the background, welcome to Hawaii, where we have a bunch of wild roosters. We're recording early in the morning. This is how we get woken up every morning as well. And so hearing that background going, what is going on? Is Chad or Rafael in a wildlife preserve right now? The answer is sort of.
So how do you deal with like late nights when you're up watching film or you're working and then you got the roosters waking you up?
The roosters, it's a big complaint in Hawaii, actually, with people waking up in the morning. They start at like 4:30 in the morning
That's
here.
what I was wondering.
It's tough for folks. we tune them out for the most part because it's just been so long or what have you. But anytime we have people come visit, man, the first day they're coming down like, what's up with those roosters? Let's go kill them all. It's impossible. They're wild. They're everywhere. Let's talk about another guy, Tristan Vukcevic. I maybe said that wrong. From playing at Real Madrid this year via Serbia, another guy who got a few minutes for Real Madrid last year as a 17-year-old. And it's the first tell, right? When you're talking about these high-level European clubs, there's no real incentive for them to develop these young players the way that there is in the NBA. They know they're going to lose them to the NBA anyway. And so when they're playing, it's typically because there is real talent there and they think that they can help a squad right now. And so he's going to be another guy who's going to get a likely expanded role on a EuroLeague team this year as an 18-year-old. What do you think about his game?
I like him. The first thing that I was trying to figure out when I was watching film on him is he just has such a unique background as far as like what country to represent. He's playing in Spain. He was born in Italy, but I think he's like Serbian and Swedish with also like a Greek passport or something like that. It's like a combination of like 4 different countries there. So I thought that was pretty unique. I think his dad is a professional basketball player, which is part of the reason why he's so well traveled at an early age. But yeah, like you said, I mean, if you see a guy getting minutes for Real Madrid or FC Barcelona or even some of the other teams in Spain, that means they've earned their minutes. It's not a developmental situation. So with is it Vukcevic? I'll just say Tristan. He's someone that I think could have first-round potential. He's 6'11". I think he moves really well. That's one of the things that stood out to me, just kind of watching him move around the floor. He's fluid, he's agile, he's coordinated. He does have some toughness to his game, which I like. I think that he just seems like your prototypical NBA role player that can come off the bench and he can knock down open shots. He's a good shooter with his feet are set. He moves well off the ball, like as far as cutting. Could be a pick and pop guy. He can post up smaller guys. So he does have a skill set that is valuable to the NBA. But again, it's the athleticism point. He's kind of like a below the rim athlete. And then if he's going to be a pick and pop player, then he's going to have to be a much more, I guess, efficient or consistent shooter. So, I mean, it's kind of the theme right now for a lot of guys. It's either athleticism or shooting is going to determine their draft range. And I think he's just, one of these guys that those are the shooting is the swing scale that is going to determine, how high he'll get drafted.
Let's talk about one last guy. You just did I think this is your most recent video over at NBADraftJunkies.com right now. Hugo Besson, the combo guard from France, another guy who's making the leap from the French B League, essentially, over to play at the New Zealand Breakers this year. A little bit older prospect, will be 21 on draft night. You really loved him.
Yeah,
man, I watched that video. You're kind of gushing about this guy. He was in the 2021 NBA draft. Didn't get a lot of buzz. Pulled out of the draft. This year, you think his chances are a lot higher of maybe even being able to crack the first round. What do you like about his game?
I just love, and I could be a sucker to offensive creativity and really confident scorers and guys that are just creative off the dribble. And so he falls into that category. I'll be honest, I was late on him. He was not someone that I had a lot of knowledge of coming into last year's draft. And, I was hoping, I wish I would have had more, just more knowledge about him during the process. But I think he pulled out because he had like an ankle injury, so he wasn't able to perform at his best during the drafts. But he was an efficient scorer. I mean, he led the second division French league in scoring, and like I said, he just put the ball in the basket. Kind of reminds me of Austin Reeves a little bit, and I'm a big Austin Reeves fan. So, but you're talking about a guy that's a capable passer and playmaker. excels out of pick and roll. I think he's a sneaky athlete. He doesn't pass the eye test for athleticism, but he's, like I said, sneaky athlete, and he was very efficient at finishing at the rim, which, sometimes that could be a sign of athleticism or craftiness, but I think he has a combination of both. And I think his age could be a factor. We're living in this crazy world where if you're 21 years old, it's kind of a knock on you, especially as an international prospect. So on one hand, I think he may get some first round looks, but then on the other hand, I just think because of his age, somehow it's going to be seen as, oh, you're 21, you're closer to your prime. And even though I think that he's going to have a better year in Australia than his teammate Ousmane Dieng, I think he's going to really perform well there. Dieng is going to be the higher pick because of his age and size and just the upside. But I like Besson a lot.
All right. Well, look, that's a pretty strong crop of international prospects that could be potential first round draft picks this year. If all of those guys hit, this will be the best international draft crop that we've had in several years, frankly, just in sheer numbers of players that are coming in the league. And certainly as many as 3, maybe even 4 of those prospects could end up being lottery picks in this draft, which is another thing that would make it strong. He's Rafael Barlowe. You can check out his stuff at NBADraftJunkies.com. Go check out some of those videos that we just talked about right now if you want to see those scouting breakdowns. You can also listen to him twice a week over on the Locked On NBA Draft podcast. I'm Chad Ford, and you can follow my stuff over at NBABigBoard.com, where we're doing international stuff. We're doing 2022, or we're looking at rookies in 2020. We're going to go next week and dive into the health of teams' young cores in the NBA and look at sort of which of the teams have the best young cores in the NBA. And Rafael, we'd love to have you back at some point later in the season to talk about more draft. Always love having you as a guest on the show.
Yeah, anytime you want me on, I'm available. And I'm thankful for the opportunity to be on your show and the platform that you've given me. So thank you.
Yeah, great stuff, Rafael. Appreciate everybody watching on YouTube. Make sure that you like this, that you go over and subscribe to this YouTube channel as well. You can even click that little bell button and get alerted whenever we have a new video. This is Chad Ford's NBA Big Board on the Locked On Podcast Network. Aloha.